Hello again and welcome. Thank you for coming and attending part 5 of our Women's Suffrage Centennial virtual series. Once again, I am Catherine Sibley. I'm a program specialist for Girl Scouts of the Sierra Nevada. We, or at least our council office, is based in Reno, Nevada, and we cover most of Northern Nevada and parts of California. So before we get to our speaker today, excuse me, got a few things to go over. Let's see. Oh, that's right. And let's start out with the Girl Scout promise. If you're able to stand up, great. If not, you can do it sitting down with your hand up like this. I'm going to ask that you say it along with me. On my honor, I will try, to serve God and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. Okay, and coming up next, you got it. The Girl Scout law is a little bit longer, but hands back up. Are you ready? I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. Hands down. Good job. Okay, so I was unable to put this in last week, and I am not super tech savvy, so I typed in the part of our Internet Safety Pledge that applies to this series. So I'm just going to read it along, and if you agree and you hear me, I just want you to either do a hand clap or a thumbs up when I'm done. I will practice online etiquette, good manners, at all times when, and that part is blocked, when online by not spamming others, not bullying or tolerating bullying, and always telling a trusted adult if I witness bullying, not using bad language. And I will be guided by the Girl Scout promise and law in all that I do online. So please give me a thumbs up or a hand clap to know that you heard that and it's all good to go. Thank you, Anika. Before I move on, I do have a few helpers today. I have Paula, who is helping with the waiting room. I also have Anika and Callie are helping me with the chat log. And then we also have Dr. Sarah Kies, and I will get to her in a moment. Next screen. Okay, so I know I told a few of you about our Women's Suffrage Centennial March. Hold on one second, my computer just did something weird. So this March, it's gonna be on August 15th. It's a week from Saturday. So we're looking for girls to dress up as suffragettes, or even if you can just find the hat, make a poster, make a banner, something that you would have seen in 1920s, advocating for the right to vote. Now registration deadline for this is Thursday. So I have a feeling there's a few more of you out there who really want to do this and haven't registered yet. So please hurry up, go do that now. Or as soon as you get off, have your adult do it. We're gonna review some of the pictures of, give you an idea of what they wore back around 1920 and what women wore. And the clothing, and yes, these are the same pictures as last week. And I believe most of them are wearing heeled boots. It's okay if you don't have heeled boots, but notice how pretty much everyone's wearing a hat. And then there's this one. Look how fancy some of those hats are. Okay, so I know some of you, so in order for sorry, let me start again. So part of watching the series is that you're going to earn a patch. We have our Women's Suffrage Centennial patch, and you're like, hey, can you send it to me? I'm going to ask that you have an adult fill out the survey that's on this screen. Just a short little thing to let me know, what your favorite part was, and I need your mailing address, because the way our data systems are set up, I cannot easily see your address if you don't live inside my council. So I also, when I sent an email to your parents or whomever with a reminder, I put this in there. And when I send out the reminder for part 6, I will put this link into that email also. Okay, let's see, what's our next screen? Okay, so I'm just about to stop screen sharing and hand this over to Dr. Sarah Keyes. But before I do we have any questions in the chat log or anything I need to answer offhand? Anika, Callie, Paula, anything offhand? Nope, I'm getting no's, so give me a moment to stop sharing. And I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Sarah Keyes, Assistant Professor of History at University of Nevada in Reno.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here this afternoon to speak with you a little bit about the timeline of women's suffrage in California and Nevada. And we're only going to be talking for about 20 minutes or so. And I'm also going to be asking for your active participation. So get ready for that. It also sounds like you know quite a bit about women's suffrage, that you've been exploring it through these different sessions that you all have been having. So I want to start by thinking about where you are in your knowledge, what you might already know about when women won the right to vote in California and Nevada. And then secondly, we're going to be talking about what obstacles some women continue to face after being given the right to vote. So let's start with the first question about when women gained the right to vote in California and Nevada. So I'm gonna get a poll to pop up. Let's see if I can get that going. And then you're gonna be able to have a chance to answer that. So let's see. Oh, here's my, let's see. Don't worry, it'll come. I just gotta get my screen back. Where did that go? So they warned me that it was possible that this could happen. And look, it's happening. But guess what? I found the polling button and I've launched the poll. Do you guys see that? So it's going. So take your time and you can start choosing answers to those 3 questions. Oh, we're getting some answers coming in. Very exciting. All right. 10 people out of 52 ticking up. Oh, California and Nevada are neck and neck for the answer to question 1.
Okay, and even if you're not sure, if you don't live in one of these 2 states, please go ahead and take a guess, if nothing else. If you're not sure,
Yes.
we want to hear from you.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. We're up to 71% of participants have voted. Let's see if we can get to 100%. 75, getting closer. Just give it your best shot.
Okay, has everybody voted?
We're getting closer. All right, we've had the poll open for 2 minutes. Let's wait about 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to close it out. And I think that I can share these results with you. Can everyone see those results of the poll?
I know I can, but I'm a host.
I think they should be able to see them. But yeah, thumbs up. Yes, I love it. You guys are great at doing those reactions. I love seeing those thumbs up. Thanks for sharing those with me. Okay, so let's see. What are we looking at with these results? Women won the right to vote in California and Nevada first. 55% went for California first. 49% went with Nevada. You all are very well educated on this. California was first. Okay, when do you think women won the right to vote in California? 61% went for 1920. That's a great date to pick. 1920, as you know, is the ratification of the 19th Amendment and national suffrage for women. But that 27% of you that went for 1911, that's the date. People, women in the West got to vote first. This is a really, really big deal. When do you think women won the right to vote in Nevada? 47% of you picked 1914. So that's the winning vote. That's also the correct answer. So very good job with all of that. You guys have quite a strong sense of when suffrage happened. And I just want to go back to, oh, you are seeing my screen. So you should be seeing my PowerPoint again. Let's make this bigger. Okay. I want you to now think about answering the following question briefly in the chat. Why did you choose the order and the dates that you did? Some of you were saying, hey, people could be Googling this. So you could say, I Googled it, or I knew it from a previous seminar, or, you know, I'm from Nevada. So of course I know when women won the right to vote in my state. So you can just type those types of answers into the chat. We'll take a few of those so I can get a sense of your knowledge and how you chose the answers you did. You asked your parents. Good idea. Parents know a lot, including about women's suffrage. Okay, you guessed. Very good. Googled. Good. You were close. You guessed. Good. Nice. Okay. Nice. Someone learned from their grandmother. Yeah, we learn a lot about the world and about history from our families. California is like Georgia, okay? All right, excellent. So we have sort of a variety of responses, including a lot of I guess, and I just want to make sure that we're all clear on the timeline. Women won the right to vote in California in 1911. Women won the right to vote in Nevada in 1914. And this is a really big deal. And it is such a big deal because the vote for women in the United States does not go from east to west, which is how a lot of whites immigrated out to California and Nevada. They left places like New York and Massachusetts, and they came out west for the mines, right? But the vote flows the other direction than sort of the contradistinction, the reverse of white migration. And this is really important because if for the white dominant population in the United States, they're saying, what? The West looks more civilized, more modern, more advanced than the East because women can vote. This is a 1915 cartoon showing the West, including California and Nevada. They're in the light. They're the font of knowledge, and they are the ones who are taking that knowledge out to the East, which is dark and despair. There's people sort of stretching out of this black mire, right? Because they don't know as much as these people in the West who have won the vote first. So that's a really big thing to think about when you're thinking about suffrage. If you want to get a sense of sort of national change in suffrage, one of the great resources to Google is this PBS She Resisted. If you put PBS and She Resisted in those quotation marks into Google, you're going to come up with this really cool page that has a ton of more detailed information on women's fight for suffrage in the country and in California and Nevada specifically. So this is a map showing the fact that in California, women won the right to vote. in 1911. So you can find this for yourself on the internet. It's really cool. There's a little video that goes along with it too. So I want to talk just a little bit about what that campaign for suffrage looked like in California. And what I want to tell you is that it didn't happen overnight. It took women in California fighting for the vote. It took them decades to win it. In 1896, they had a huge campaign to try to get women the right to vote in 1896. So that's what? That's like 15 years before 1911. 15 years. Most of you haven't even been alive that long. It's a really long time. And when they fought for the right to vote in 1896, they fought not only with women who are living in California, but women who came from across the nation to try to help them win the vote in California. Tell me in the chat if you recognize any of the people in this photograph of women who campaigned for the vote in California in 1896. Nope. And if you do recognize them, tell me who you think you recognize. Let's see if you can recognize any of these ladies in black and white. Susan B. Anthony. Yes, that is exactly right. There she is. She's probably one of the most recognizable figures in the suffrage movement because her face is on statues, it's on the dollar, it's on so many things. Excellent. Excellent. Yes, is one Mrs. Catt. Yes, we've got Carrie Chapman Catt. Now, Carrie Chapman Catt was really important in the suffrage movement. She's also really important in the temperance movement, where women tried to outlaw alcohol and things like that. And in fact, this overlap between the temperance movement and the suffrage movement caused problems for suffragists because business interests were worried that they might get liquor outlawed in cities. So this is one of the reasons why women in places like California initially had some defeats, including that in 1896. But women did not give up the campaign for the vote. They kept trying and they kept marching and they kept speaking. And in 1911, they won victory. And part of the reason why they got victory in California in 1911 is because they reached out not only to cities like Oakland, California, which is pictured here during a women's march, but also to rural counties. So they organized across the state, they got feet on the ground, and they were able to narrowly get women's suffrage passed in California in 1911. If you want to learn some more specifics about their fight for suffrage, you can check out some of these resources online. And this is recorded, so you'll have access to these later too. But we've got articles from the National Park Service. We've got a really cool site that was created by the California State Archives. We've also got a site from the Secretary of State's office from the state of California, all talking about how women fought for the right to vote in California. Now, they fought for a long time in Nevada too. And the campaign for suffrage in Nevada had some similarities with the campaign in California. And one of those similarities is that Nevadans also experienced defeats before they experienced victories. So Nevada got women's suffrage on the ballot in 1912 and 1913. They lost in both those years. But in 1914, they secured victory. So if you have a failure, you don't win the first time, just keep trying. That's the lesson. Another thing that suffrage activists in Nevada did was, like those in California, they took the fight to rural areas. And this is even more impressive in Nevada, which is such a challenging climate. It's so hot, it's so isolated. There's so many rural areas, right? You know, I think Nevada is one of the states with the largest amount of federal public land still today. These women got in their cars, which weren't super safe back then. You could blow a tire, you could run out of water, and they went all over the state campaigning. So they went out to these really hard places. They showed they could do it. They showed they had the endurance to campaign, and they were also showing that they had the wherewithal, the endurance to vote. Another thing that Nevadans relied on in their successful campaign for suffrage was, like the people in California, they relied on support from national organizations. And so one national organization sent out this woman, pictured here, Margaret Foley. And she came to Nevada in 1913 to help campaign for women's suffrage. And she went to these rural places. And Margaret Foley was really known for her ability to connect with everyday people, with people who were workers, with people who worked with their hands. That was, in fact, her family background. And she'd been part of a trade union. She helped to make hats in Boston, where she was from. Now, when she came out to Nevada, she's like, I'm going to do the same things I've been doing in Boston that have been so successful. I'm going to go talk to the workers. I'm going to go talk to the miners, right? One of the big industries in Nevada. And so Margaret Foley goes down to the Comstock mines near Virginia City, Nevada, one of the biggest mining operations in the world. And she goes, okay, I'm going to talk to these miners, but I'm just not going to show up. I'm going to put on their coat. I'm going to put on their pants. I'm going to get one of their mining hats, and I'm going to go down into the mines, and I'm going to talk to them there. And Foley said to the press, you know, other politicians show up to talk to miners and they just send down their literature into the mines, but I went down myself. So this became a really big deal, a really important part of her campaign, that she connected with workers in their place of business, and that she showed that women were strong enough and tough enough to go down into those mines. And so by doing this, she helped Nevada women win the vote. If you want to get on the internet and find out more about women's suffrage in Nevada, these are some good sites to check out. And again, this will be recorded, so you could follow these links later. But there's Women Nevada History, a Nevada Women's site, and there's also a Suffrage in Nevada site that you can go visit. Now, I just have one last thing to tell you, and then I'll be done talking to you, and you guys can ask me any questions that you have. So the second part of your elective wasn't only about the timeline, but about the types of challenges and obstacles that women had even after they won the right to vote in Nevada and in California. And those dates were Nevada in 1914 and California in 1911. Now, one of the challenges that women have is that women of color have to continue to fight for the vote. Giving the vote, even after 1920, primarily means that white women get access to the vote, but women of color fight for the right to vote as well. Now, there's a lot of great resources that are coming out that can tell you about this fight that continued well into the 20th century and in some ways still continues into our time today. People who have difficulty accessing polling locations or have to wait for a really, really long time. That's an obstacle to exercise their right to vote. So you can check out these resources later. You'll see them on the recording. Now, I can't talk about all of the different organizations that were wrapped up in the right to vote and advancing the voting rights of women of color. So I'm just going to focus real quickly on a group that was particularly important in the US West, Indigenous peoples. And I want to start by showing you another political cartoon. This one is again from 1915. Now, in the chat, tell me what you think this cartoon might be saying. This is the cartoonist depiction of Iroquois, of an Iroquois group. This is a cartoonist depiction of suffragists, white suffragists holding the banner of women's suffrage. The text is, "We, the women of the Iroquois, own the land, the lodge, the children." Any ideas about what this cartoon might be saying about the relationship between white women's suffragists and Iroquois people, communities, and the Iroquois nation? And if you don't have any ideas, that's okay, but I'm just going to give you a few minutes to think about it. And if you can't see something in the image, or you just have a question about something you see, just type that in the chat too, and I'll try to answer it. Okay, so what this political cartoon is saying, look at these women, they're celebrating, they've worked so hard, these white women, to carry the banner of women's suffrage. They're trying to get the vote, but look at what the text is saying from these women of the Iroquois. They're saying, well, we've owned land, we've had the right of adoption, we have had the right to make treaties. We've been part of a matrilineal society in which women have had political power for centuries. So why do white women think that they're so modern and different when we used to do this, and we still do it for a very, very, very long time? And so the cartoon's pointing out a tension that's kind of like that one in that cartoon I showed you where the vote was going from west to east. The East sort of thought, oh, those Westerners, they're not as civilized or progressive as we are. But white women voted in the West first. So that sort of contradicts what Easterners thought. This cartoon is showing from an indigenous perspective that the idea that white people are more advanced and more modern and they have women's suffrage, that's not so true, because actually this matrilineal society existed in indigenous communities way longer than the fact that white women won the vote for suffrage in the United States. So it's sort of pointing out that tension there. And leaders in the indigenous political movement in the 20th century also pointed out this tension. And one of the organizations that they used to make these points about sort of their civilization and their modernity and their sort of the benefits of their traditional ways of life as well was an organization called the Society of American Indians that was founded in 1911, the same year that white women won the right to vote in California. And this society advocated for a number of issues and advancements for indigenous peoples in the United States. One of the issues that the society campaigned for was citizenship for Native Americans in the United States under federal law, and thus the right to vote. And one of the major activists in this movement was a woman who was known both as Gertrude Simmons Bonin and Zitkalasa. And she campaigned relentlessly from her position in Washington, D.C. as the secretary of the Society of American Indians. And she advocated for dual citizenship for indigenous people, citizenship in their indigenous nations and citizenship in the United States. And she was successful. In 1924, indigenous people win citizenship and the right to vote. Now, she didn't stop fighting in 1924, though. She kept fighting to protect indigenous people's right to vote until her death, because she had to fight against things like disenfranchisement, where you can't get to the polls or you can't get your ballot. You don't have access to those resources. So the fight was ongoing, but she did have some successes. So that's all the information I wanted to give you. So we're going to turn over to the questions portion, which I'm not sure if we're going to do that through audio or through the chat. Either way is fine with me. So Catherine can just remind me what the plan is for that.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Keyes. Oh, thank you. So does anybody have any questions for her? I do realize that if anybody needs to hop off, I know time's almost up, you can definitely say bye. Otherwise, now's a good time to ask her some questions. Like she said,
Who else was in the picture? That's a great question. We had, we talked about Susan B. Anthony, Carrie Chapman Catt. There was also Ann Bidwell, Ida Husted Harper, Selena Solomons, Lucy Anthony, Dr. Anna Shaw. It's a really big deal to have female doctors. A woman by the name of Ellen Clark Sargent, and Mary Hay. And that picture is included on one of the resources I sent you. So it lists all their names there if you follow those links for the resources on women's suffrage in California. Some good sources to learn about women's suffrage. I suggest looking back at those links I showed you. I can also send my PowerPoint to Catherine. I'm not sure, but I'm sure she'll figure out the best way to share it with you. If someone asked if they were beaten, yeah, so there were defeats before the victories. So it didn't just happen overnight. It wasn't just one campaign, woohoo to victory. It was a long, drawn out fight. Yeah, so definitely you can get the slides.
If you can send me your PowerPoint, I will send it on to everybody else.
Perfect. Do
Yeah.
women of color still have trouble voting? Yes. Yes. Say your question, Olivia S. How many years did it take? Okay, well, that's sort of how do you want to start the beginning of the suffrage movement? Do you want to start it with Abigail Adams writing to John while he's drafting the Constitution, telling him, don't forget women, remember the women, is a famous quote that she says. Women in Britain and the United States started arguing that they should have full citizenship and voting rights at the end of the 18th century. So you're talking about the 1700s. So if you want to, you could maybe even go back that far or even farther. So I'd say, you know, hundreds of years. Who can also tell us more about the other people who are in the video? Oh, the video from the PBS, She Resisted? Yeah, follow up on those women. There should be more resources on there. Were they hurt because they were fighting for the right to vote? So the suffrage movement in the United States got what was called increasingly militant, where they were not only marching in the streets, they were doing things like chaining themselves to the gates of the White House to try to get the president, Woodrow Wilson, to listen to them. They were being imprisoned because they were breaking the law by going to the ballot box. When they were in prison, they were staging hunger strikes and then they were being force fed. So yeah, they were physically hurt. Comstock mines. Comstock mines, they helped to make Nevada what Nevada is today. The Comstock mines were one of the largest deposits, particularly of silver, and also some gold in the late 19th century. And they were a huge profitable magnet for people to come to Nevada. It's what helped to make the state a state in the 1860s. And they were still around in 1913 when Margaret Foley showed up and went all the way underground, 2,500 feet. You've ever been to Virginia City? If you haven't, you should go. You can Google Virginia City and the Comstock and learn all about that. Okay. Okay, well, were there any women who did not want to vote? Yeah, that's a really good question. So there were women who were part of the anti-suffrage movement and who explicitly said they did not want the right to vote, that they were comfortable sort of expressing their political will through their husbands, leaving the men more in the public sphere. So there were divisions not only between women who wanted the right to vote and men who opposed them, but divisions between women who had different ideas about what women's roles should be or what type of political power they should have. All right, someone's got a grandma who is named Comstock or connected to the Comstock mines. That's very, very cool. Very cool. I see that. Thank you for sharing that. Let's see. I can look up a link for the anti-suffrage movement and include that on the slide to help answer your questions, excuse me. Okay. So you guys probably have to get going, right? But if you have additional questions, my PowerPoint slide resources should help. And so I'll make sure to send that to Catherine so you have access to it.
That'd be great.